Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Pond, awards editor at TheWrap, and we're happy to have you here for our screening of I'm No Longer Here, Mexico's entry in the Best International Feature Film at this year's Oscars. We're going to start with a trailer to the film, and then I'll have a conversation with the director, Fernando Frias de la Parra. And for the audience, please participate in the live chat during the conversation. And at the end of our Q&A, we will be taking audience questions, so you can leave those in the chat as well. So before I introduce Fernando, here's the trailer to I'm No Longer Here.
Así se baila la cumbia en Monterrey.
Tercos. Pero sin molestar, locos.
Ni siquiera te esperaron, culo.
No mames, güey, yo no sabía, güey.
¿Ves? Por andarle pegándole la mamada jugándole el malandrito. Ya le c***aste la vida a toda tu familia. Y no quiero que te comuniques con nadie.
Sí, ¿quién habla?
Quiero mandar un saludo para mi raza.
Como no, con todo gusto, carnalito. ¿De dónde nos llamas?
De acá de Nueva York.
Caray, qué internacional.
Esta paga la canción, ve. Vamos a bailar.
16. How old are you? 17.
¿Tienes otro lugar donde ir?
Ahí luego veo.
Is there any way that I can take your photograph just like that?
Hey, he doesn't speak English.
Welcome back. It's my pleasure to introduce director Fernando Frias de la Parra. Welcome.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Steve.
So what has it been like? I mean, I think you were able to show this movie at film festivals theatrically a little bit before COVID hit, right? And then it's had a good life on Netflix since then.
Yeah, I think I've had a little bit of everything, it's a good combination. So we premiered in October 2019 in the Morelia International Film Festival. Mexico is I would say the biggest film festival there. And then we have like a run of festivals, like a little bit into 2020, but of course, like the global pandemic came, and we had also like a small theatrical run in Mexico and in Argentina, and then from mid-March till May there was nothing, of course, but then at the end of May we released on Netflix.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the different things that sort of went into your approach to this film, starting with the music. I mean, how familiar were you with this slow down cumbia music and that subculture?
Well, I was familiar with it because it's something that was like the origin of the film in many ways, because I like personally I like countercultural movements, of course, but I like to work around cultural clash because, or like the difference between languages, or like syncretism, even glitches. I'm very, very drawn into those kind of things. I like to think that the world offers something else that just like the very repetitive things that we experience more and more. So the music was something that I got like years ago. 2006, my friend Emilio came back from Monterrey with a bootleg MP3 CD full of these cumbias rebajadas. Cumbias, of course, I knew, it's something very popular in Mexico, and where I used to live, where I grew up in Mexico City, like in the back of my house, there was like this street, and they would do like block parties every other Sunday at night. And I remember being very young and listening to this cumbia sonidera, and it was like dark but joyful at the same time, because of like this DJ announcing, and it going into like very almost into like the next morning. So then, but of course that's one kind of cumbia. When I listened to the rebajadas, to the slowdown, I was fascinated by them because of the reinterpretation of something that it's originally meant to be like more joyful, and how it becomes something absolutely different or way more nostalgic, and I just took that as a starting point, because then there was it was very well known, at least in Mexico around the 90s, that in Monterrey there was something very big around the cumbia, and the cumbia, because of a guy called Celso Piña, started to bleed into other aspects of life, or other sectors of like listeners, if you want. So before it was just like considered something for like people in this kind of settlements, or like it was something very much looked down, and then in the 90s, because of this guy, it started getting mixed with rap and hip hop and with rock and roll, and there were collaborations. And at the same time in Mexico there was like this new wave of not reappropriation, but like revaluation of like things that were born in the streets, and taking pride on that, because up until then everything was like, oh, we're just consuming things that come from other places, mostly like the US. But so there was like this new angle of interest from young people in every aspect of the Mexican society, or most aspect, to look into the things that were born in Mexico with different eyes. And well, then it was of course very much connected to the cholo culture and to the gangs, and yeah, I mean, for me the music was like the start of everything. And I like to say that this slow down music, a slow down version of the cumbias, somehow represents this idea of like fighting the pass of time, wanting something to last longer, because there's like lack of opportunities. There's no social upward mobility whatsoever, it comes from the streets, from this very marginalized and stigmatized sector of the society. And I like the idea of like establishing some sort of this analogy between the slowing down and the kids knowing that the future is not looking bright at all.
Yeah. No, I know you were also interested in doing something about the way violence in Mexico is depicted on screen. I mean, was that something that, an important consideration for you in this?
Absolutely, Steve. But more than just on screen, it was more about like an ideological standpoint, in terms of like how are we as storytellers, or like writers, filmmakers, musicians, how are we going about the stories that take place in our territories, and who are they for? I mean, it's all good if it's just like it's meant to shock and be like like this blockbuster, or like musical hit between this like genre that celebrates violence and all that exists. And I mean, when it's like very openly that, I don't have that much of a problem, but I started to have a problem when there was like this idea of denouncing, or like raising the voice and representing this violence, but then it felt like it was still playing for the shock value, and it felt like it was made for people across the ocean, or for other festivals, and to feed into this hunger for sordidness, for miserability, if that's even a word. But then that started resonating in a very dangerous way, generating a vicious cycle of like, the more you export this glorified violence for these like exclusive audiences, the more they are like celebrating them, and then you have more people wanting to jump on that train of doing that kind of content, and then you see like programmers and other people only responding to that, voices coming from places like Latin America and other places of the world, and that definitely made me think a lot about it, you know, especially considering when I have taught or talked to younger people who want to do things, and it's more about like the idea of wanting to be recognized and knowing that there's an output for that kind of like of content, and my problem began with like, well, you know, if you're talking about this reality and taking these things from real life, and not focusing so much in the people you are representing, I see a problem, you know, because I mean, at least just like take out this element of saying that you are like giving voice to the voiceless, because that doesn't sound very legit to me. So I wanted to see, I mean, what could I do differently? You know, of course, this is making me uncomfortable, but then how would I go? And I felt like, well, the biggest impact of the outside world, it's inside us as humans and as society. So I wanted to explore this real context with very real elements, just like you listen to the voice of the real Mexican president back then talking, or like the news on the television are the real news, or so many things like that. But I wanted to focus on the inner conflicts of Ulysses, of the character, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, obviously the film is set in the early 90s, but I would imagine you can't be making a movie, you know, in this era about a young Mexican who comes to the United States without knowing that you're dealing with very current issues and views of immigrants and all of that. I mean, I assume that was something that was always, you know, in your mind as you were doing this.
Well, it's set actually in 2010, so it early, yeah, not in the early 90s, but so it's, I don't know, like in my head it was always 2010. That's what that president was. He was from 2006 and 2012, and that's, I saw the escalation of violence. You know, there was this very poor strategy about the war on drugs, you know. And at the beginning of this administration, like cartels were like kidnapping kids to force them to work for them. At the end of this administration, kids were raising their hands, wanting to join the cartels, you know, themselves, you know. And of course that speaks also about immigration. You know, this particular cartel that raised or became stronger during that administration controlled everything. Not only from the drug trade, but also like extortion, kidnapping, and unified all of the people who were like coyotes, you know, the people who help or who get paid and sometimes abuse like the necessity of the immigrants that want to go across the border without documents. So yeah, and it's the situation, as we know, has been changing drastically, you know, like from administration to administration, from year to year. When we were actually shooting our film in the summer of 2018 in New York, because we first shot in Monterrey a year before that, and we had to stop. And that's another thing that we can talk about. But when we were shooting in 2018, and we were shooting the detention center with the immigrants with this silver blankets, you know, aluminum blankets, the crew was really, really touched because those images were on the news every day. We were knowing finally about ICE and about this detention center. And I wouldn't say that this hasn't happened before. It's just we are learning about them more than ever, you know. Or more than before. And for me, speaking specifically about the immigration aspect of the story, there were two important things. One, I in a completely different and opposite almost circumstances, I myself have migrated from Mexico to the US, and this idea of like thinking, oh, I went there for studies and for this, with this scholarship, and this idea of like, oh, you're going there for something that it's supposed to be better, but when you are there, it quite doesn't. So some sort of, I guess now looking back, maybe connects with aspects of the film. Back then, it was not something that I had conscious, but for me, it was very important in my to show something that I've experienced myself when getting in communication and in touch and researching with other immigrants that migrated in harder, of course, circumstances, and learning that, of course, like their journeys can be so different, and not everyone who is there is for the same reason. Not every Mexican is the same. Not every Mexican in New York is from Puebla. No, not everyone. I actually met someone from Monterrey there, and some people in Mexico are like, oh, that's not very truthful, because like, how are you gonna think you have people from northeast Mexico migrating? Well, you do, and not everyone who is there wants to be there. That's also a very important thing. Not everyone who thought they were gonna get saved feel actually that they are saved over there, and that touches on other aspects of the history of the U.S. And the immigration, of course. But finally, in terms of in grammatical terms and in terms of like how of the story, having a character that is displaced allows me to like board on his emotions, and through those emotions look back into the past, into the place where he felt like he belonged, into the place where he felt he was about to become someone, and it's the whole point of the film somehow, like this stolen possibility, what could have happened but ended up not happening, and in this film for several reasons, right?
Right. I think there's also a sense in the film that, when he is displaced, then the things that give Ulysses his cultural identity suddenly become treated like a fashion trend or something. Do you feel like subcultures like that are in danger of losing their identity over time?
That's a great question, and I feel that the way in which we live in particularly in the US, but also like in the capitalist world, is about selling ideas and not selling things. It's selling a lot of illusions. Like the acquiring aspiration and dreams or objects. And using things. Just to like to add on the idea that we have from ourselves based on what we can acquire. What we can afford. So that, of course, like sends the world into this spiral of like needing to sell more stuff, and profit from it, and selling identities, and we live in this world where it doesn't matter if something is the real thing as long as it passes for the real thing. That rules our world nowadays, very sadly. So this idea that counterculture has always been inherently contestatory, something that somehow like is spontaneous in a way. It's a syncretism, or it responds to something very specifically and in a not planned way. Not planned way. When I say in a not planned way, I'm talking not about like a marketing strategy, like then it's of course, like you say, commodified and trying to be appropriated. And this world is crazy because you can go into Walmart and buy a bandana with the Che Guevara in it, and that's the world we live in, but of course, contradiction. It's also very. It's a fundamental part of the human of us humans, right? So. For me, like these cultural accidents are necessary because we learn from these accidents. Like if everything becomes the same, like there's less room for us to learn new things and to communicate, and then that's where we can end up being in falling prey to this very dangerous rhetoric of like the one that looks different is dangerous. It's only you who, if you want, you can become different if you dress like this or like acquire all these set of ideas that we have already mixed and prepared for you. So when I decide to look into a countercultural movement that like it's spontaneous and I am trying to celebrate its values and honor it and show in a not didactic or like expositional way what it's responding to, just by creating scenes that are almost like documentary, like small moments with subtle drama, if you want, but that represent why these kids, for example, that have belong to generations upon generations of neglect and marginalization and lack of opportunities. Well, they are not stupid. All of the opposite. They are extremely intelligent, and they know that they feel this stigma, they feel this rejection, and it's a human thing to want to belong to something, like these gangs, where in this particular case where family and society have left the kids standing and waiting, the gangs stood up for that because there's belonging and there's like identification, which is very important. But most important is the fact of like finding dignity for your own persona. So the idea of being able to reinvent yourself, like, oh, people in downtown Monterrey think that because the kids of the settlements are like dark skinned and dressed that way, that they are ugly and dangerous and they are criminals, and that's just like prejudice. They don't know their circumstances, but they feel this rejection, and then that's why they in my opinion, that's why they reinvent themselves and changes their names. Don't use their last names, use the last name of their gang, because they are choosing a new identity based on that rejection. And the clothes, like, they are big because they want to fill in that space, and that's a tradition adopted from cholos that who adopted it from Chicanos, who adopted it from Sud, and who adopted it from like African American communities. So there's a whole system of symbols, and responses. So I think that looking into a countercultural movement, it's more than just looking at its superficial values, however visually appealing they are. There's a whole layer of information and things that they are responding to, and by creating this world. So that's why it was very important for me to do it there.
Yeah. Right. So how did you go about casting the film? Because most of the, the actors weren't professional actors, especially the ones who were like the Turcos and all, right?
Yeah, none of them were actors. There's two actors in the film, Ulises' mom, who came from theater, and the guy in New York who screams at him when he's trying to dance on the subway, like someone who's looking like homeless and affected, everyone else had never had experience in film before. And casting was, I mean, not only casting, but like working with the tercos or creating the tercos was for me like the part of the process that will live forever in my heart, because it was unique for every role. There was behind every one of these kids or these characters, there's a story of how we both found each other, and how sometimes them had to like make big sacrifices to be able to join the film, or how us as a production had to like create the space or create this bubble to help, because unfortunately it's not a lack of talent what it's over there. I found a lot of talent and candidates, but the life circumstances are very hard, most of them have kids already, by very early age, or they need to support their families. So how would they come to do like a callback, if it's nothing that it's like they are working in a factory and they cannot skip a second day, so how are we going to do that? So this is once we have found several candidates, but finding the characters itself was something very, very different. Some, like trying to, first of all, like Monterrey is really, really hot during the day and colder during the night. So most of the kids are only hanging out outside and at night. At that age, they're with the gang. So at the moment you show up there with the camera, and they are like having like the protection of all of their gangs. They either start performing or they don't welcome you very much, just like to show this territoriality. But so that was tricky to show up on there on our own. So we try to do it during the day. Of course, we are recreating a scene that happened, like you said, from the 90s to the moment where we were setting the story around. But when we were shooting, it was gone. It's also another one of the points of the film, So then having to find these kids, one by one, and asking, and then saying, well, this seems like he has such a spark, I want to learn more about their life, and then next time we will have to go to their places and see what was their life like, and from there starting to create the basis for a relationship. There's a lot of trust issues there because violence has hit hard over there. So with the girls, for example, the parents or the siblings that were like, no, what is this, what are you doing? So it was complicated, but in the end, what we did is we put together a group of the Tercos and some others, and we said, we still don't know who exactly is going to be whom, but if you are here already, it's because you have a role, and this is going to be like a summer camp. We're gonna rehearse, we're gonna rewrite together, we're gonna like learn different things, and then we'll see who's gonna play who. And that for me, Steve, was the best part of the process, because a lot of incredible accents for the scenes came from there, and they helped me and showed me much more than what I was writing, and yeah, I mean that was great,
Yeah, let's talk a bit about the challenges of the production, because I know you shot in Mexico and then you had to stop and raise money, and then the State Department wouldn't let Juan Daniel, your lead actor, into the United States. I mean, what was the process like?
Yeah, well, first challenge to begin with, it was trying to explain people what I wanted to do. Like I had a script, and that to me was solid. We went to the Sundance Lab, and at some point in my school at Columbia, they said, no, this doesn't work, and I was like, well, this is how I want to do it, and I was like, I knew where I was going. I knew I wanted to build in these two parallel times, and through the juxtaposition, and create meaning from that, and having the emotions lead the way, not the information, but it was difficult, and then it was difficult with producers as well, like they were like, no, but only non-actors, and no, how are you gonna like try to do this, like then it was difficult with the DP, like, well, if they're not professional actors, I mean, I'm not sure, and we want to use this language, which we think is the right one, this grammar. Are they going to be able to land in their marks and do this blocking? They proved to be amazing for that, by the way. So there were like first level of challenges, credibility. Let's say that. Second level of challenges was this precisely trust and casting. Like finding incredible kids, and they were like, because I would go to this dance party or found someone, and then like, what's your number? Oh, I cannot give you my number. Oh, I don't have a number. Well, write down the number of the guy who runs the store 3 houses down mine, and then next time we would try to track that girl or that boy, and they're like, no, nobody knows. Oh, they had to flee because their family got in trouble. I'm like, no, like then 4 months later, oh, she's back, she wants to be part of it, but well, does it matter if she's pregnant? And I'm like, like, so it starts like that. And or a guy like, oh, like I have so many. He was showing up every day for like, like for a couple of weeks, like, I want to work with you guys, I know a lot of friends, like let me show you this and this, and then, okay, you want to work with us? Okay, here's let's do that, work with us. And then he took our camera and never came back, and then, well, it was like so many stories like that. And then like the kids, of course, like some had like very difficult life situations that I said, but so that was one thing. The other level of challenges was that we had an earthquake in Mexico City that was happened exactly the same day that the one in 35 years before, and it was a bad one. So a lot of, and that was only a week before we started shooting. So a lot of our crew that came from Mexico City went back to Mexico City because the buildings that they lived in were really affected, or they had to go and have evaluations on their building or recover their possessions. So that had us move and push for like 3 weeks, and we were already like late in terms of weather. And Monterrey is desertic weather, and it never rains, but only 1 month, September, and we had to shoot when it was raining. And so it was just a nightmare because it was raining every day nonstop, and it was very difficult. And then we had to stop and wait. Juan Daniel was 17 back then. He couldn't get a passport because there were some irregularities with one of his parents' papers, and we said, well, let's wait for him to become 18 in February. We're talking about November. Let's wait for him to be. We're not shooting in the winter in New York. It doesn't make sense. So we get him. We wait until he becomes 18. The day he becomes 18, we have already like prepared the visa as an O2. I have an O1, which is like alien of good abilities or something like that, an artist visa, commonly known. So if I'm a choreographer and I want to bring a dancer from outside, that's the way it would work, so it's the same. So we have the O2 already approved, and then he's 18. The day he becomes 18, he gets his passport, and then he goes to the first appointment to at the American embassy. The visa is already approved. But because he's 18 and not 17, he cannot walk in accompanied. He has to do the interview on his own. And he gets like brutally rejected at the second minute. We were like, what? So our immigration lawyer in the US sent us the transcripts, and the questions were like almost seemed designed to make him fail, So we prepared him again for the second interview. And again, they're going hard for him. And I'm like, wow, but this is already prepared, approved. He's just going for the stamp in the passport, for the little thing. And then he blew the third one, the same, and it was like questions like, oh, here it says that you that besides acting, maybe you're gonna help them pick up after filming. And he's being as nice as Juan Daniel is. He was like, oh well, yeah, if they want us, we are like a small team and we are each other help. Denied. And after 3 rejections, if you fail the fourth one, you cannot apply in 10 years. So back then I couldn't even walk. I was so stressed because I felt like I have already half of the film shot. How am I gonna do what are the options? I mean, crazy things were crossing my mind. And finally he made it because we put together like letters from everyone and from all the grants we've had, and we told him, don't respond anything, just push until they see the letters, the first 5 letters, and then the day he came out and he was crying, and we all like hugged and cried, and then he came to New York.
Right. Wow. Yeah, I mean, there's at that point, what are your options? I mean, if he can't shoot in New York, you're kind of sunk, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, crazy things were crossing my mind, especially about crossing, I don't know.
Yeah. He also told me that earlier in his life, he both of his legs had been broken. And so there were times when he just felt like he couldn't dance anymore.
Yeah. So the thing is, I mean, he has like a portentous athletic ability and body expression, but he didn't know how to dance for this rhythm. He's very young, and he works as a welder, and he climbs like so many stories, and with little safety, and it's very agile. And we knew that since the beginning, and he showed it to us. It was something very characteristic of him. But then there were other candidates for the role that were dancing, and because they were all there and came more from this Colombia movement that the way it's shown in the film, and Juan Daniel didn't precisely, and he didn't dance at all. So he pushed himself very hard to learn to dance, and then rehearsing and then filming, he was not a trained dancer, and so he was not warming up, and our acting coach would make him, you have to warm up. But when you are young, sometimes you have resistance, and then, hey, let's just hey coach, put me in without warm up. No, you have to do warm up. And then in the middle of the shoot, he told us something that we didn't know, that when he was very young, he broke both his legs, and so he needed more warm up, especially, and he would get like really swollen, and then we had like ice packs ready, and yeah, but he didn't want to show any weakness when dancing, and I like that he just keeps certain things to himself, that how quick he is, and he just came from the back, learned how to dance, and without letting me or Bernie, the acting coach, that he had already like nailed this or other step, he will just come and in the middle of a scene do it, and so he was also like showing off a lot there in the preparation,
Right. Yeah. So is the subculture, the slowed down cumbia music, the Colombia subculture, is that pretty much gone now?
I think cumbia will always be part of Monterrey and Mexico, and cumbia colombiana specifically will always. It's in the heart of people there. But that style, dressing like that, and the hair like that, and dancing like that, yeah, it's pretty much gone. And more so, well, I mean, a legendary musician passed 2 years ago that came from Monterrey, but he played the accordion, and he was his name is Celso Piña, and the name of his band is Ronda Bogotá, and so Monterrey has this close relationship with Colombia and with the cumbia, but the style is pretty much gone, and there's trends in the streets and stuff, but also nowadays, like the mass communication through social media, it's like it's bigger than ever before, and then there's just like rhythms that just go everywhere in the world, and right now there's like everything is kind of unified with trap and reggaeton, and the street tendencies pretty much look very similar to others in other places in the world. So yeah, and in the film we tell the story of like something that happened, like this new cartel that actually was formed by military members, by dissidents. This cartel was all against this look, and whenever they kidnap the kids to force them into working for them, they will like cut their hair and tell them not to dress like clowns, or like, and so that was also like very influential in this style, at least vanishing. I think the film is bringing it back a little bit, because I'm seeing crazy things that I couldn't have imagined.
Really? Well, before we take questions from the audience, let me just ask, when you were making this, were you thinking about making a film for an international audience as well as for a Mexican audience?
To be honest, I didn't think of that very much, but yes, I was not thinking about like, oh, it will work more for international, it will work more for but we went to several work in progress outside Mexico, and it was very interesting to see the expectations based on what they were looking, in terms of like the colors and the clothes, and that what they were expecting or what they are used to, and how it was somehow for many people, they were unable to read through certain nuances and the way the film it's meant to be. But so without consciously deciding, oh, this is a film for Mexicans, oh, this is a film for international audiences, I was committed to represent and honor what I learned through my research, and I also wanted to I mean, I'm Mexican, and I make Mexican films, and I was considering a lot the situation in the country, in my country, and also this is something I wanna be doing for in my professional career, directing films, and I think I have to consider the audience, in that noise. I have to consider the audience and my audience in my country. This film was partly state funded, and I feel like there's there at least I personally feel there's a commitment to reconcile the film and consolidate the industry in Mexico, but reconcile other options of content that can make people connect with the film. It's not only like because like for generations people have assumed that commercial success means shitty films, and artsy films that have like awards internationally means terrible local box office in Mexico or success in Mexico, and I didn't want to take that for granted. I think there's another way of doing things, and now, I mean, the thing that makes me the happiest is to see the response of Mexico. If you go on Instagram and see the fan art and the response of people, it's just become something that I've never expected, and I'm very, very happy that I was the ultimate terco, stubborn, to push for how we wanted to do this film,
Right. I mean, it must have been a thrill to see the video where Alfonso Cuarón and Guillermo del Toro were talking about your film as well.
Well, yeah, it just still feels kind of unreal, it's been a couple of months, but I remember when the video came out, I just couldn't see the whole thing. I mean, I don't know why, I just couldn't. I couldn't see it, but I had already talked to both of them on the phone, and at the beginning I was very, very nervous. But they're both like extremely generous, each one in their own way. I've learned so much from them, and like not only film things, but also like this care and cariño and like this idea of helping the new generation, and supporting, and that's really something I would have never ever imagined.
Yeah, right. I think we have a couple questions from the audience that they'll put up. Yes, Liz wants to know, can you talk more about the relationship between Ulysses and Lynn?
Sure, Liz. So Lynn came to me and in the screenplay as an oasis in the story, and all of the things in the film come from real life experiences or things that I've seen, and for me it was something very funny but also very interesting. Whenever I went to the bodega near where I was living in New York, and there was like this bodega owned by a Chinese family who had employees who were Mexican, and the owners of the deli, of the bodega, learned Spanish from these Mexican guys. But these Mexican guys are very young, and they're just like talking very like dirty and street and full of slang. So, and these like families that come from Fujian, and they are like Christian Chinese families, and it was for me hilarious to see this old woman dressed in her church clothes, saying like these super vulgar things in Spanish, but that's the Spanish she learned to communicate with her employees. So that was for me something that already was there, as a small detail, of course. Then, of course, in more meaningful information, I would say that the relationship for me was important. In some people have celebrated that when the film is like promising, oh, he's gonna find his place there, and there's like a love interest, that I play with those expectations and take it somewhere else, and that I'm misleading on purpose. I didn't want people to go in one direction with their expectations, but I actually wanted to do something in like just in the same way that not every immigrant ends up with this American dream story. And the same here, he's not even able to connect with her romantically, but because he's well aware of how much he's missing what defines him, and that the price of assimilating maybe is leaving behind what defines him. So it's a very difficult inner negotiation, personal negotiation. And then this girl, as charming as she is, and she somehow is using him a little bit, but in a more dangerous way, because because she doesn't know she's using him. You know, she comes from a good place in her opinion, but once she gains a little bit of street credibility, she kind of like moves away from him, or she just likes certain aspects of him, maybe just not anything else. And so this relationship was meant to be built in such way in which they are connected and disconnected beyond their control, you know, and it's just more the circumstances that being young imply, you know.
Yeah. Okay. We've got one or two more. Claudia wants to know what happened to the kids who acted in the film. Are any still acting?
Yes, Claudia. Well, so many of them are still acting. One of them is a front runner for a TV show. Then Juan Daniel made a film recently, grabbed the film recently in Mexico, in Durango, with an important role by an European director and renowned producers. And now he's making another one in February, another Mexican film. He's invited to a lot of castings for TV shows. The same with Chaparra and Jonah. So I would say half of them are still like acting and want to go in that direction. Some others have like other little appearances and music videos and stuff like that. But most of them are still doing it or exploring different ways, such as radio work, or we made a podcast in Spanish, 5 episodes with them explaining like their journey and secrets of the film that nobody knows and all that. So, and we made it with them, and as a way of like providing continuity as the film is gathering more momentum and becoming bigger outside. We want them, and it's a personal commitment to have them be parallelly living that together, you know?
Yeah. Okay. I think we have one more. Let's see. Francesca from Rome. She'd like to ask you if you see Ulysses more as a rebel or someone who tries to escape his violent reality.
Hi, Francesca from Rome. If I see Ulysses more as a rebel or someone who tries to escape his violent reality, I think those two options are mutually exclusive, but I don't know if I see him. Well, I know maybe a rebel back in. I mean, maybe he's a rebel in New York because he stands against what he's supposed to do in order to adapt. In that way, yes, he's a rebel, but he's escaping a violent reality. Yeah, he was threatened and he didn't plan to leave, you know. So I think in New York he's both things, you know. I don't think in Monterrey he's particularly a rebel, but he belongs to a rebel thing that it's rebellious by necessity. And I think that in Mexico, he's not trying to escape the violent reality around him, but he's not wanting to be part of certain things that you know, like can easily change one's life from one day to the next, you know. That's why he kind of like takes care of the other kids in the gang, you know, and he's just more about the dance, the style, you know, and looking good and not than just like than selling drugs, and you know, and that is the other way out. He's not so much about that, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's just a terrific movie. Congratulations on the success so far, and you know, we hope you have continued success from here. I also want to thank everybody who joined us today. We'll be having lots more of these screenings, so check out our free trial TheWrap Pro to learn more about the screenings, and check our screenings page at screenings.thewrap.com. So, Fernando, thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, TheWrap, and thank you to our listeners.